Hey everybody, I've been doing a lot of reading lately and I wanted to share with you what I've been reading and what I thought about what I've been reading. This is some of the books that I've read over the past couple of months, going in order from least to best. I'm also going to share with you what I'm reading right now and what I'm going to be reading next. If you would like to let me know your opinion of any of these books, if you've read them, or if you'd like to join me in reading any of these books, and we can take the journey together. These are all going to be in the suspense, thriller, and horror genres, except for one book, which is really special, and it's my absolute favorite one. So I definitely have to tell you about that because that kind of got a whole craze started for me that I'll tell you about later. But my first one here that I wanted to show you is the Stephen King and Richard Chizmar, the Gwendy trilogy. This is a series of 3 novellas. The first one being Gwendy's Button Box. This is my favorite one out of the 3, and it was really fantastic. This one goes through Gwendy's life as she is a young girl. She's probably about 12. And she is running up the stairs at a park in order to try and lose some weight over summer break. And she meets a very strange man with a hat on. And so there's the hat. He presents her with a box that has 7 buttons on it, I believe, that are one for each of the 7 continents of the world. And then it has a black button that is an everything button. And then it has, I think, a red button, which is a button that does anything that you want. So you push the red button and you think of what you want, and then it happens. It also has a series of 2 levers. We pull one lever and a silver dollar comes out. It's like a very specific, very old mint condition silver dollar that is worth like $600. And then the other lever dispenses, and with that comes a piece of chocolate. So she tries one of the chocolates and she takes a look at it also. They're very, very intricately designed, beautifully detailed chocolates. Each one is of a different animal and no 2 are ever the same. So you eat this chocolate and it gives you this really incredible sensation, perhaps a supernatural or an otherworldly sensation. And she ends up finding that when she eats this chocolate once a day, she no longer has cravings to overeat anymore. So she just eats a normal, healthy amount and then stops. So she ends up losing weight. It also seems to have other effects that are cumulative over time as the weeks and months and years pass by, where she becomes extremely athletic, and she also becomes extremely lucky. Like, she always seems to win at every game she plays. She never gets sick. She never does anything that's clumsy. And then I just love some of the illustrations. Like, this is one of the illustrations in the book here. And I'm just going to talk about anything that I want to talk about in these books, so feel free to click off the video if you're worried about spoilers or anything like that, because I'm not going to be worried about spoilers. I'm just going to talk about things how I want to. But I really love this book so much. It goes through girlhood, school life, scary things, mysterious things, in a true Stephen King fashion. Then we get to the second book here, and I liked this one a lot. This one is more her middle years, like her late 20s and her 30s. And this goes through her career, where she wrote a couple of books and got famous from those. And then after she had best-selling books that she wrote, I think they were like romantic thriller type things. Then she became a congresswoman. And at the end of the first book, she ends up relinquishing the box back to the mysterious man. He comes back for it. So there's a spoiler, sorry. But at the second book here, she ends up coming across the box a second time. It's been out of her possession for over a decade at this point. And then all of a sudden she comes across it again and she's like, oh my gosh, what's going on now? What am I going to have to do now? And dealing with being a congresswoman at the same time. And then in the final book here, Gwendy's final task, she is now in her 60s and she is going up into space in order to destroy the box. So she's on like a top secret final mission in order to bury the box out in space where no one can ever find it in order for their safety. So this is a really good series that I do recommend. The only thing of why it probably wouldn't be my favorite is because, I really don't like when Stephen King gets political, which he tends to do a lot lately. And also, I don't really like space, it gives me the creeps a little bit. And also, it's kind of boring, sitting around in space or being a congresswoman. So I guess maybe the settings of the second two are not really my deal, but overall they were still really good books. It kind of reminds me of like one that's not in this pile, but I did read it recently. I just already turned it into the used bookstore, is Gerald's Game. So that's one that I read recently too. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Gerald's Game or read the book Gerald's Game, but it was kind of similar where I liked the book and it was really good, but it was definitely far from being one of my favorite Stephen King's because the entire book takes place where she is chained to a bed. So it's like, there's so much he can do with that. Like she flashes back into the past a lot and she thinks about things in her head a lot. So it goes places in the book that are other than being chained up to the bed, but essentially it always comes back to being chained up to the bed for like the entire book. So, you can do as much as you can do with something like that, but there's only so much you can do with it. So I liked Gerald's Game, but because of the setting, it wasn't my favorite. I liked these a lot, but because of the political setting and the being in space and stuff like that, it wasn't my favorite. They were well done for what they are, but there were ones that I liked better than that. The next one that I have here is, I don't know how you say his name. Is it DeLiu? Brian DeLiu, The Dismantling. So this apparently is an entire series of books that he has that are called the Hater series. And this is just one of them. I actually don't think it's the first in the series or something. I think it might be like number 4 or... I think there's like a trilogy, an original trilogy of the Hater series, and then there's a second trilogy that comes after that, and this is like the first one in the second trilogy. But yeah, I'd never read anything from this author before, and it seems like almost all of his books are related to those haters. But this was really interesting. Again, is it my favorite book of all time? No, but I would still give it a very high rating. I would give it, 4 stars. I did really like it a whole lot. And it basically starts out where there's these kids that are on a ship, and the ship is going somewhere, and it's a class trip, and they're supposed to be gone for like 2 weeks. And this one girl, she's like listening to her Walkman or something like that and thinking about how she doesn't want to be away from home and everything and all the stuff that she's going to be missing out on and what a bummer it is and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, this one girl on the boat just absolutely starts losing her shit, and she grabs a weapon and just starts beating everyone to death all of a sudden. Like all the adults and everybody, just beating the shit out of them. And then everybody on the ship dies. And then it starts on the book, which is this one guy, what is his name? Matt. We'll say his name is Matt. It was like a month ago when I read this. He's on the island. He's on this island for work for a couple of weeks. He's on a special mission with his crew for a couple of weeks. And they're supposed to be going back very soon. But the people have been called to come get them, pick them up from off the island. and nobody's come. And they're wondering, why haven't they got here? You know, there's bad weather that's delayed because of the weather. We're having trouble getting through. Don't worry about it. And then the ship washes up onto shore, the one with the class of kids. They go on board and they see all of these dead people from all of these horrific deaths aboard the ship, and they're like, holy shit, what is going on? So they go to report it and everything on the radio, and they can't get anybody on the radio. So they're like, what's going on here? They're starting to freak out. They're starting to panic. They have no cell phones because they have their phones with them, but they're way out on an island and there's no cell phone towers anywhere near, so they have no reception whatsoever, no chance of getting any reception whatsoever. All they have is the radio, and nobody's picking up on the radio. And then eventually somebody does pick up on the radio, and it's a woman, and she's completely panicked, and she's basically saying that the world has gone mad, and then something happens to her and it's cut off. And then one by one, people start getting picked off the island and people start losing their shit. It's almost kind of like, reminds me a little bit of like 28 Days Later, where people are like infected with rage, but they're not dead. They're not zombies because they're still alive. But these people are like, if on 28 Days Later, you'll see people like, like they seem like they're sick and they're dying, like they're not in control of their mental faculties or something. These people are seeming like they're totally in control, but they've just totally gone mad. So it's really bizarre, and it doesn't seem to be airborne. It doesn't seem to be, there's no identifiable cause for why it's spreading from one person to another person to another person, but it seems to be able to just happen at any point in time. Anybody could become one. So now they're all looking around at each other, mistrusting each other. Did you do this because of that? Are you really one of them? And stuff like that. And so not only do they have to worry about the people that are trying to murder them, and that anybody could be trying to murder them at any second, but they're also dealing with who's going to be the leader now that the world has basically gone to shit, and we have to be in charge of ourselves instead of relying on anybody to come save us. And, you know, bickering about who's going to be the leader and who needs to listen to this person's ideas. Why should we listen to him? He's a piece of shit and all this. And so they're dealing with that, as well as, you know, paranoid ideation because of the state of panic that they're in. So it's really, really crazy. It's really suspenseful. All these people on an island trying to survive and work together, and alliances forming into different little mini groups and stuff like that. And yeah, it's really good. I don't know if I'll go back and read any others from this series at some point. I may later down the road, but right now I just have so many books that I want to read. And it was something that I am holding on to this in order to be able to remember it for later if I want to, at some point later, maybe get another book of his and read it sometime down the line. But I did really like it a lot. I hope I did a good job of explaining that. I kind of like spaced out and was thinking about it while I was talking about it. But the next one I have here is Riley Sager, Final Girls. It says, Stephen King says it's the first great thriller of 2017 is here. So I read this, and then another one that I don't have in front of me is I also read Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl. Okay, so those are really in the like female suspense type of deal. And you know, I'd already seen the movie for Gone Girl, so I was kind of like, you know, it's like, it's chick stuff, you know, I'm too cool for chick stuff, and I've already seen the movie. It's, you know, and you start reading the book, and oh, they're like these rich New York people, and it's kind of pretentious and everything, and you're just kind of like, whatever. But I ended up really, really liking Gone Girl a lot. It was awesome. And, you know, although I did see the movie of Gone Girl, it had been so many years since I have seen it that, you know, you forget little bits and pieces and details and stuff like that. And then also just, as you know, I'm sure you already know, But you go and you read the book after seeing a movie or something, and this just, everything is so much more detailed and so much more in depth, and it just makes the story so much richer that I really enjoyed it a lot. Gone Girl was awesome. So I went into this with kind of a similar attitude, like kind of like, whatever, you know, because I remember when this came out and so many people were talking about it, and it just seemed like so, I'm like, it has to be overhyped, and it's so overhyped that it has to be lame, you know? So I was kind of just being a little bit judgmental going into this, but I was like, whatever, I'm going to try it out and see. And I loved this. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. You know, I heard all this criticism years ago about how Riley Sager is like a pen name that some man came up with in order to sound more androgynous, like this could be a woman writer or something like that. And descriptions of like sexual things that people thought that he didn't understand what a woman wanted in a description of, you know, sexual activity and stuff like that in the book. And I just found, you know, all of the criticisms to be a load of crapola, you know, like what one person says about, you know, sexcapades or whatever is not going to be what the next person says. You know, I don't think that there was anything that I found to be totally invalid in here. And also, you know, as far as pen names, Stephen King has written under a fake name before. Anne Rice has written under a fake name before. And those are like the two most famous authors that I even know of. So is it a little bit weird? Yeah, it seems weird of why people would want to do that. But there's been so many women authors that will put their initials instead of their first name in order to sound more ambiguous, like they might be a man, so that way someone would be more likely to pick up their book and take them seriously if they don't know that it's a woman. So I guess why can't men do the same thing now that men are in the shit house these days? So, I mean, you might as well if that's what you want to do. But I thought this was really fantastic. And there were so many twists and turns. I mean, out of all the books here that I have read in the past couple of months, or that I've read since I started reading again, which was a couple months ago or so, this was the only one that I just absolutely ate this book up. I read the whole thing in like 3 days because I could not put this down. And normally what happens was I'll start on a book and it'll be a little bit slow going at first. And so the first half of the book, you know, 40 to 50% of the book, I'll read through it very, very slowly because it's just, I'm not super invested yet. And then once I get about halfway through, I start feeling like I'm really, really emotionally invested in it now, and I have to know what happens, and I have to go see what these people are doing and everything. And then the last half of the book, I blow through really quickly. This just absolutely gripped me from page 1. I could not put it down. I could not wait to see what was going to happen. Like I said, so many twists and turns, and it just made me think to myself of so many times that I'll be watching a movie and I'll see a little hint of something, or a little, like, you know, clue or foreshadowing of something, and I'll be like, oh, I bet that it's going to be this, or I bet that's going to happen, or I bet he's really this, or she's really doing that. And like 98% of the time, like 98% of the time, I end up being right. It's like so predictable. It's so tired, you know. This, I had moments where I was like, is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? You know, is this what's going on? And I was wrong every single time. Like, this was not anything that I would have predicted. And it was really, really good. I liked everything about it. It was awesome. Would highly recommend for sure. And then the next one I have here is The Green Mile. This is another one kind of like Gone Girl, where I was like, well, I've already seen the movie, you know, so is it going to be boring if I read this because I've already seen the movie before, so I already know what happens? And the answer is no, it was not boring at all. This was so good. It was just another time where I think, wow, I'm so glad that I read this, because even though I knew what was going to happen in the end and everything, and knew a lot of details about what happens throughout from seeing the movie, there was so much more to it, and there was so much more detail and feeling, and everything was so much more rich. So I absolutely do recommend The Green Mile. I would give this totally 5 stars. This is one of my absolute favorites. Yeah, and I was just, it really took me by surprise that I liked it so much more than I thought. Another one that I read recently, but that I don't have in front of me, is From a Buick 8. I ended up giving that one to my father-in-law so he could read it because we just went up to Georgia for Christmas. But From a Buick 8 would be my top favorite Stephen King that I've read in the past couple of months, but this would be my number 2 favorite. Again, From a Buick 8 really took me by surprise as well, because I saw the car on the cover and I was like, oh, it's, you know, it reminds me of like Christine or whatever, like the car's alive. Okay, we already know the car's alive. And I even saw that in some of the reviews on Goodreads, where people were like, oh, it's just a mix of Christine and this and that or whatever. And so I thought, you know, I kind of thought like, oh, wow, you know, the car's alive, you know. We already know that old so-and-so. But From a Buick 8 was really incredible, and I loved it so much. I loved everything about it. It went through a lot about time, connections, loss, grief, people looking out for each other, and all in the setting of a police station, like a small police station in a small town in Pennsylvania. And I thought that one was just amazing. And again, there were twists and turns I didn't see coming at all. And From a Buick 8 was just really like, whew, I love that one so much. That was one of my top favorite ones. And then this is second to that one, but it was still really good. And again, you know, if you have any other Stephen Kings that have to do with a police station or a law enforcement or something like that, drop the titles of those down below so I can check them out, because I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, From a Buick 8 was a police precinct, a small precinct in Pennsylvania, and basically the entire book took place among the small crew there. This is law enforcement people as well, but it takes place in a prison hall, death row, by all of the people are prison guards, and then a few of them are prisoners that are residing on death row. And yeah, something about that, you know, kind of close-knit. They're at work, but also there's more to it than that. And I don't know, something about that, it seems really interesting. It gives a really interesting feel to the story. So let me know if you know of any other ones like that. I love the part about the mouse. If you're familiar with this story, there's so much about the mouse. I like this one part where they don't know what happened to him. You know, I'm just going to say it. If you don't want spoilers, click off of this video. Okay, this is a spoiler. But there's one part in the book where they don't know where the mouse ran off to, and they end up finding a hole in the wall. And the mouse had a little colored spool, and he would push the spool around. That Delacroix would push around and have him go retrieve it and bring it back to him because he was so smart and everything. And then after Delacroix was executed and the mouse ran away, they found that spool that had been smashed by Percy. And there was like little shards, little fragments of the spool. And the mint candies that Delacroix would always feed him. And they found the mouse had been in that little hole, and he had saved those shards of wood, colored wood, and the peppermints. And they had a faint smell of peppermint in this hole in the wall, and they knew that the mouse had been, like, I guess, cherishing memories, you could say, with Delacroix, which is makes you think, like, what? But it's a mouse, you know? And then come to find out in the very end that the mouse lived all these years because of John Coffey healing him, and it did something to him where he lived 60-something years, and that he was taking care of him out in the back of the shed of the retirement home. Like, I love that part so much. Like, that was my favorite part of the whole story, but the whole entire thing was incredible. Yeah, so From a Buick 8 and The Green Mile. One thing that I found out about that I'll just share with you really quick before I get to the last two here is Goodreads. If you have a Goodreads profile, I really like it a lot. So I made a profile on here so that I could share my profile with people on Etsy and they could see what I've already read in order to not send me like duplicate books and stuff like that for when I want to get a blind date with a book box. And you can import all of your Amazon purchases into here. So any books that you've bought from Amazon will automatically import. And then you can also manually add books if you have other books that you want to add to it. But it just kind of cuts down on time a little bit and stuff if you have books that you've ordered off Amazon. You can put all the books that you've already read. And you can also make a list of books that you want to read. If you have like a kind of a to-do list or a to-do stack of books like I have. Or just ideas of things that you have seen around that you want to buy but you haven't bought them yet. You can put them in there so that way you don't forget about them. Because what I would always do is go to Barnes & Noble and I would like take photographs of the books that I wanted to get but that I couldn't get that day, you know. And so that way I wouldn't forget them. But then you take a million more pictures and it's like I'm not going to scroll down forever and ever and like go find those from months and months ago, you know. I'm going to forget about it and then it'll be lost to time. So this is a lot better way to keep record of that. So that way you can go back and get books that you want to get and make sure you don't forget about them. You can also put what you're currently reading. And it lets you track what page you're on. So like right now I'm reading Dr. Sleep and I'll talk about this one in a few minutes. But so it shows here when I put currently reading Dr. Sleep, the website already knows that there's 531 pages in the book and I can track what page I'm on. So like, for example, right now I'm on page 216. Well, I told Bobby my husband Bobby that I like that. And he was like, yeah, but you can see what page you're on just by looking in the book. And I get that. Okay. But what I like to see is I'll read this for a while throughout the day and I'll not be thinking about my Goodreads. And then, you know, hours will pass and I'll be like, oh yeah, let me update my Goodreads. And then I'll look and see what page I was on the last time I updated it from like hours and hours ago or like the day before or something versus where I'm at right now. And I'll be like, oh wow, I read 60 pages already. Like, oh man. And then I'll just feel like accomplished because I didn't realize how much that I read in such a short period of time, you know? So you get that feeling of accomplishment. It helps you keep going and keep getting more reading done. So I really like keeping track of things on my Goodreads because I feel like it's a really helpful resource in order to keep me going and keep me on top of things with my reading. So that's a really nice resource to have, I feel. Let's get back into this next one here. It's Dan Simmons and it's called A Winter Haunting. So this is my last one from the horror genre that I have finished reading. And this was my favorite from that genre that I've read. It was incredible. Highly recommend. It has everything you need. It has childhood memories. It has, you know, scandal. It has hellhounds, haunted houses, bullies, farming equipment accidents. It has, you know, skinhead Nazi motherfuckers that want to try and murder you. It has dead high school girlfriends. It has everything you need to have a terrifying, spooky time. So this was really, really good. Apparently, it's a series. Summer of Night, I guess, is the most famous one of them. It's like a series of 4. But from what I gathered, out of the 4 seasons that he has out of there, 2 of them are unrelated, I believe. And one of them is the book that happened when he was a child. the story of everything that happened when he was a child. I have not read that one. But this takes place when he is about 50 years old. And so basically what happened is, what's this guy's name? Is it Dale? Yeah, Dale. So Dale, I'm losing a couple details here because it's been about a month and a half or 2 months since I read it. We're going to say Illinois. Is it Elm Haven, Illinois? Is it Illinois or Ohio or one of those? Let's just say Illinois. Okay, so for the sake of telling the story. So basically, when he was like 11, he was really good friends with this group of a handful of boys. And so it was him, he's Dale, he's the guy, main guy. And there was his friend Dwayne, which was his best friend. And Dwayne was like a really unusual child. He was like an extreme genius. He knew so many different languages. He had like an eidetic memory. And he would read all of these really complicated old books and just memorize everything, know everything. He would be able to make up his own language. He would be able to read Old English. He could do, all these complicated equations and stuff. I mean, he was like a really unusual fellow, and he was just a kid. So what he would have grown up to be like, he would be like some kind of Stephen Hawking or something like that. But he never got to grow up because one summer, which is the summer of night, I believe, he was at home alone. I believe his mother had passed away, and ever since his mother had passed away, his father had been drinking a lot, and his dad was out at the bar. So no one really knew what happened. It happened at nighttime. It was like 9 o'clock at night or something like that. For some reason, he was out in the barn, and there's like this huge, I forget what it's called, but it's like this huge machine that like harvests the corn or whatever out on the farm. And it somehow was turned on and like scooped him up and chewed him up in the machine. So everyone always thought that his death was really suspicious. They didn't think that it was an accident, but no one could prove anything because for all intents and purposes, it just looked like he was there alone. There was no evidence that anybody else was there or that anybody did anything to him. And so it's just remained a mystery all these years. Well, Dale, basically, he's in his early 50s now, and his life has just recently fallen completely apart because he was married and had 2 daughters, and he was a college professor, a literature professor, but then he went and had an affair with this woman that was a student of his, and then he had to get divorced and lose custody of his kids, and now and then the girl just dumped him anyway because she was just like a 20-something-year-old college, like she was not even taking him seriously. And so now his life is like in the shit house, completely fallen apart, and he's like, you know what, I'm just going to take a sabbatical from work, and I'm going to go out here, I'm going to go back to Elm Haven. And he has rented the house that his friend Dwayne used to live in. And he's like, I'm going to stay in this house and write. And I'm just going to spend a year writing a book. And he's just going to be kind of like keeping to myself, writing and finding myself again, getting my life back together. So he goes to this little town, and all of these really strange occurrences start happening. He starts finding messages that he didn't write on his computer, and they appear to be from Dwayne because they reference, Beowulf and Old English writing and mysterious riddles and stuff like that, references to the old days. And he starts seeing these black dogs following him around, and he runs into this woman that was a girl he had a big crush on when he was in high school. And she comes over for Thanksgiving dinner, but then some really weird stuff happens with that. She ends up basically getting murdered, and then they find out there's a really big twist. I'm not going to mention what the really big twist is on that. I'll leave you to a little mystery on that. But this was incredible, and it's super freaky. It has every kind of scare that you could possibly imagine. It has it all, and it was really, really good. I like this so much that I wanted to find some more books by this author. Again, Summer of Night is the prequel to this. But there wasn't any other ones that I found super appealing except for this one book that I am planning on getting and reading. It's called In This Way I Was Saved. But I think they changed the name of it. And I wonder if he might have like some science fiction type stuff. Summer of Night. Because there's all this stuff on here from him that looks like science fiction. It doesn't look like horror, like Hyperion, Endymion. Like this looks like science fiction type, or like fantasy. Maybe it's fantasy. So maybe he's like kind of doing a horror. Maybe he's kind of writing outside his normal genre or something. Let's see. In This Way I Was Saved. It's about a young boy's world. Okay, my bad. I was thinking that there was a book that was renamed from this guy, but there's not. So this is a series of 4 books. But like I said, I think 2 of them are like vampire books. And the other 2, there's this one and there's the one that is from when he was a kid. And then the rest of his books, I think, are like sci-fi and fantasy. So I think that's mostly what he does is sci-fi and fantasy. But I would maybe be curious to get something else from him at some point, but it'd probably be a different genre than what I normally like to read. The other one that I wanted to try is actually from this guy, Brian DeLiu. Brian DeLiu. He's from the UK somewhere. But that was the one that I was thinking of that was renamed, where he, I think I already bought it off eBay and it's on its way here. It's called In This Way I Was Saved. But it's also called Daniel Isn't Real. I don't know which one came first and which one came later, but it was like re-released and renamed. So I think it was originally called In This Way I Was Saved, and then it was renamed to Daniel Isn't Real. So that's the only book that I could find, because I wanted to try something else from this guy, but I didn't want to read part of the Hater series. I wanted to try like something a little bit different. Even though the Hater series was really good, I just wanted to get something fresh and different, you know what I'm saying? Like just get a different feel for something else that he did. So we'll see how that turns out. Maybe I'll read that one in the next month or two. If I do, I'll let you know. But yeah, Dan Simmons' A Winter Haunting was really amazing. I hope that maybe he will at some point. Dean Koontz calls him brilliant. Maybe he will do some more horror instead of just fantasy and sci-fi. I wonder what year this book came out. Oh, it's pretty old. 2002. I think I just came across it on Amazon. I thought it looked pretty cool. So, it's pretty old already. So that is everything that I have read in the suspense and thriller genre. I can talk to you about this book that I'm currently reading and what I'm going to be reading next. But before we do that, let's get into the book that got it all started. So, yeah, when I was a kid, I used to read all the time. My teacher got us a book that was kind of like a little bit mystery, a little bit adventure, mostly adventure, I guess. fiction book when I was about 8, and from that point on I was just hooked. I started out reading like Goosebumps, and then I graduated from Goosebumps to reading like Fear Street, and I would also read Christopher Pike. Like I remember Christopher Pike had so many good books, and my mom would take me to the library all the time, and I'd get tons and tons of books to read. Yeah, so I loved Fear Street, and I loved Remember Me. That was a really good one, and there was also a really good called The Last Vampire, and there was a whole bunch of them. I mean, there's so many I can't even remember, but yeah, one of these days I'm going to go and read some of those old books that I loved so much from my childhood, like maybe The Last Vampire and Remember Me, and what's some favorite ones from from R.L. Stine that I liked to read back in the day. There was one, there was like Fear Street Saga. Also, sometimes I think about like Anne Rice, like there's like Lasher and Taltos, like what is that called, Mayfair series or something like that. That was really fantastic. There was one by R.L. Stine that I really liked called The Dead Girlfriend. That was definitely one of my favorites. There's some that I can remember what happens in them, but I can't remember the name of the book. There was one called The Best Friend that I loved. That was one of my all-time favorites for sure. But anyway, to get back onto the subject, the book that got me started was The Secret Garden. So I would just be too lazy to go pick up a book and read it, and I would just watch YouTube all the time. My friend got me this book because she has a little area in her backyard that she calls The Secret Garden. I mentioned I never read it before, and she sent this to me in the mail. Actually, it was a different version of this, but I lent that to a friend, and so I went ahead and bought a different copy. It says, "I'm sure there's magic in everything." I just love how artistic and how beautiful this is done here. I'm sure there's magic in everything. And it's gilded. Let's see, does it have any... It's beautiful. So yeah, after years and years and years, you know, I'll be all at Barnes and Noble or something, or browsing on eBay, and I'll see a book that looks really good, and I'll buy a book, and I'll say, I'm going to go back to being a book person like I was when I was young. And years go by, and the books just piled up and piled up and piled up, and I would read maybe one book a year. You know, I just wasn't doing it. And I would just watch YouTube constantly, and I'd be too lazy to go pick up a book. After I finally read this a couple months ago, it was just so beautiful and so perfect and so inspiring. Now I go and I look at YouTube or something like that, and everything just seems incredibly boring. And all I want to do is go read a book, because I know that that will be so much more fulfilling and exciting and so much more rich and detailed, and it'll just give me so much more to it than just, you know, just this vapid wasteland of empty crapola there is all over the internet now. I mean, the quality of viewing content from when you know, we were young and we watched television and stuff like that, and now versus like looking at like YouTube or something and trying to find something to watch on there. I mean, it is just a bunch of crap. Even this, if you're sitting here watching this, it's just a bunch of crap. You know, go read something. It'll be a lot better. But yeah, I love this story so much. It starts out in India, and you know, Mary. I never knew the Mary, Mary, quite contrary. How does your garden grow? I never knew that was the secret garden, but I knew that's, you know, saying my whole entire life. But that comes from this book. She's basically, I don't think she has a father, but she has a mother, and her mother is like this little fancy, beautiful, rich debutante type lady. And they're living in India for whatever reason. And, you know, she's fancy and she's admired by all the men, and she's got her, you know, lover or something like that. And basically, Mary has hired help there in India, but everyone hates her. And nobody plays with her. Nobody spends time with her except for her. What does she call her? Raja or something like that? Which is her, basically her nanny in India that has to because she's paid to. And she's just a sour little girl. Everybody thinks that she's ugly. Everybody thinks that she's unpleasant. That's why they call her contrary. And, you know, she's bossy and unpleasant, and she's very sour. And, well, one day, you know, Mary's just sitting in her room by herself, like always, because she's always by herself, and nobody comes for her. And she just sits there playing by herself, and nobody ever comes for her. And it turns out that there's been a huge outbreak of cholera, and everybody's died. And so finally, you know, law enforcement and medical rescue and all that, they come to clear the bodies out. And they find that Mary's just sitting in there by herself, all alone. And nobody was looking for her. Nobody came to rescue her. They just happened upon her. And she lived through the cholera outbreak that killed everybody around her because she was just all by herself, and she didn't catch it. So they trying to find a next of kin for her. And the only next of kin that she has is an uncle. And the uncle lives in this like great big huge manor out on the moors. So she gets shipped over to England, and, you know, she's like in a horse and buggy, like riding down this long, huge journey to go to this place, this uncle that she doesn't know. She's never even met him, and he's apparently quite an intimidating man. And, you know, she's nervous. She's never been to England before. She's only like 10 years old, and she has not a friend in the world, no family left. So she gets there, and, well, there's a few different characters. Mrs. Medlock is basically like the head lady there, and she's kind of a hard ass, you know. She's not really like anybody's best friend or anything like that. She's pretty much a hard ass. So Mrs. Medlock. And then there's Martha. And Martha is, you know, probably like a teenager or something like that. She's a bit older than Mary, but she kind of does a bit of like housekeeping and stuff like that and brings her meals. Well, so when the morning comes, Martha, and she's got a real country accent, you know. And she comes in, and she's like, Mary, you know, I brought you some breakfast. And Mary's like, you know, dress me. I need to be dressed now. And she's like, what do you mean you can't dress yourself, you know? And so they kind of like butt heads a little bit at first, because Mary's like treating Martha as if she's like, oh, you're my servant. And Martha's like, not really. I work for Mrs. Medlock. I don't really work for you, you know, but she's nice. And so she does help her a little bit to get dressed, because Mary doesn't even know how to dress herself, because she's had everything done for her entire life. And, you know, so they get a little bit closer because she's coming in every day to bring in the meals and everything. And she's trying to tell Mary, like, if you just go outside and you get some fresh air, you know, like my family does, then the cold air from the moors is going to do you good, and it's going to fill your lungs, and it's going to liven you up a little bit, and you won't be so yellow, and you'll get some strength back in your lungs. And, you know, so she's telling her that, Martha's telling her she gets to go home like one day per month. And when she goes home, she goes to her mother's cottage, where she has like 6 or 7 or maybe 10, I can't remember, brothers and sisters. And so she helps her mother do the wash and do the cooking and stuff like that for all of the kids. And they're very poor, but they're also very happy. And they go outside and they play all day long. And what's his name? Dickon. So Martha has this younger brother called Dickon. and he goes out every single day and he plays on the moors, and he has just become so enthralled with the nature and with being outdoors all the time that he has learned to talk to the animals and be friends with the animals. And, Mary finds this really intriguing. So Martha goes home for her day to her family, helping with the wash, helping with the baking, helping with the kids. And she comes back and she says, hey, Mary, there was this like traveling merchant that came by while I was home. And I told my mom all about you. And, so that traveling merchant came by, and my mom said, well, we've got 4 places to put every penny we've got. We haven't really got much money at all, but, this doesn't cost very much. So why don't we go ahead and get it for Mary? And it was a jump rope. And so she says, just here's how you do it. You skip rope and just practice this and keep doing it. And the more you keep doing it, you'll be able to do more and more and more, and go outside and do it every day. And it's going to help you get your strength back. And then you're going to have strength, then you're going to have energy, and then you're going to, feel better and be happy and everything. So Mary goes outside and she starts doing the jump rope, and she continues talking to Martha, and she learns from Martha that the uncle that owns the place and everything, he was married and he had a wife, and his wife had a beautiful garden, but the garden was closed up 10 years ago and has been forgotten and locked away ever since, and no one even knows where it is because they threw away the key and it's just been lost to time. They were all forbidden to ever go in there again, and eventually everybody just forgot. And she was like, well, why did he hate the garden so much? Like, if that was her garden and she loved the garden and then she died, like, why would he hate her garden so much? Like, you would think if that was her space that she tended to every day and she loved so much, that he would want to keep it going in memory of her, right? Well, it turned out, Martha told her the story that one day the wife was out in the garden, and like a huge tree branch, she was like sitting on a bench, and a huge tree branch fell and smashed her and killed her. So it was basically the garden that killed her, and that's why he hated the garden and he locked it away forever. So she was really intrigued by this story, and she decided she wanted to try and find where the garden was. But of course she didn't want to tell anybody about it, because if you tell people about it, then it's not special anymore. She wanted it to be a big secret, so that way it's fun and exciting, because there's absolutely nothing to do there. And she has no friends, she has nobody. So she starts feeling very intrigued about the idea of this garden. And she starts asking Martha, like, do you think you could get me some seeds and some bulbs and things like that? And she's like, yeah, I could do that. Because it turns out that Mary gets like a small allowance every week, so that way she can buy something for herself if she needs anything. So she gives the money to Martha, and Martha, next time she gets to go home, she gives it to Dickon. And so Dickon goes to town because he's really, really good, not just with animals, but with plants and stuff like that too. So he can pick out like a gardening set with like, a trowel and a rake and other things like that she'll need, like a small gardening kit, as well as some seeds, flower seeds, and some bulbs. And Martha tells Mary all about bulbs and how bulbs are great, because that makes even where poor people can have a garden, because you plant like the bulb, and then over the years the bulbs multiply and you get more and more, and then you can have like a whole bunch of bulbs and all these flowers because they'll multiply over time. And then so that way you can only just buy a couple bulbs and still eventually have like a whole bunch of flowers, even if you're poor. And so she's like, yeah, I'll send Dickon into town and he'll get these things for you. So she's outside, and she's looking for the garden, and she can't find the garden. And she comes across this crunchy old gardener called Ben Weatherstaff. He's like a crunchy old man and everything. And he's got a little bit of a sour attitude, and he's quite contrary, and Mary's quite contrary, and they're both quite contrary, but they kind of have a little bit of good conversation and everything, and they start warming up to each other. But then Mary asked about the secret garden, and he gets really gruff and grumpy again and just like kind of brushes her off. And so then she's back on her own again. So some time passes, and she ends up coming across Ben Weatherstaff again, and they get to talking again. It seems like maybe he's like let go of the grudge or whatever. And a robin, a beautiful robin, is hanging out with old Ben Weatherstaff, and she's like, oh my gosh, look at that. And it's almost as if this robin is so special. It's almost as if he understands everything. Like, he understands what they're talking about. He likes them. He wants to hang out with them. He's like fluffing up and showing off for them and everything like that. And she's like thinking to herself, how incredible would it be if I could be friends with a robin? Then I would be friends with somebody, you know? So, one day, she's kind of looking at the robin up in the sky, and she notices over this wall, he's like on a tree branch over this wall. And over the wall, there's all of these beautiful climbing roses. And she's like, that's where the garden is. This is the garden. He's standing in the garden. But how can I get over there? There's no door. So she searches and searches and searches. Well, days come and go, and another day she's out there again, and she sees the robin again. And I think somehow he signals to the ground. And she looks to the ground and sees that the earth looks like it's been disturbed. So she starts digging, and she finds the key from that was thrown away 10 years ago. She's dug it up and she's found it now. She's like, no, all I have to do is find the door. And so the robin's like hopping along, trying to kind of like show her the way. And there's along the wall, it's so overgrown all over the place with ivy. And she pulls back the ivy, and then all of a sudden she sees the door actually is there. It's just completely covered by this ivy. So she pulls it back and she gets into the secret garden. So she's looking around in the secret garden, and it's very gray. You know, it's still winter. It's just starting to come out of winter and just the very first beginnings of spring, but it's still pretty cold and things are still pretty dead. And everything looks really gray. And she's just like, you know, maybe it's been too many years since the garden was alive, and maybe it's dead now and there's no hope for it, you know, and it's not going to be anything. Well, she ends up seeing a little blonde boy with big juicy red cheeks, and she's like, that's Dickon, you know. So he has come to bring her things, and she shows him the secret garden. And she's like, can you tell me if this is something that's salvageable or is it dead? And he gets his knife out and he like cuts the branches and sees that there's green inside. And he's like, it's still alive. It's going to come back. And he's like, I can work on it with you. So he comes every single day and they work on the garden, you know, tearing out weeds and planting and just tending to it until it's grown into a beautiful place. Meanwhile, when she goes in every day on the evenings, she keeps hearing crying in the middle of the night. And she's like, what is all this crying, you know? Every time she asks about the crying, you know, Martha will just make some shit up that sounds totally whack. Like, oh, it's just the wind, you know? And she knows it's a crock of shit. She's like, there's no way it's just the wind. So the third time it happens, it's really late at night and nobody's around. So she decides to go down the hall and find the source of the crying. So she goes in, and there is this little boy in bed. And it turns out he is the uncle's son. What was his name? Golly, I can't think of it right now. Colin. Okay, Colin. And he's been sick in bed all of this time, like his entire life. He's the same age as Mary. And he is the child of the uncle. But basically he's just locked away, and nobody ever talks about him, because if they talk about him, it just makes him feel like they're talking bad about him, or they're talking shit about how sick he is and stuff like that, and it ticks him off. So he's just like, you're not allowed to talk about me. And so they're all forbidden to talk about him, because he's like the boss's son, so pretty much he's in charge of shit too. And so that's why everybody has been like keeping him a total secret, is because he's just been locked away with nobody allowed to say a word about him, or else like he'll get ticked off and they'll lose their jobs. So that's why it's been a secret the whole time. And basically he's laid in bed his entire life, because the uncle is like a hunchback a little bit, and all his life he's been told that he's going to turn into a hunchback and then he's going to die. So he's just been laying in bed waiting to die this whole time. And like he doesn't even walk around or anything. He has to like sit in a wheelchair. And Mary's like, is there anything wrong with your legs? And he's like, they're just so weak, I can't really use them. And so she's trying to figure out if she can trust him and everything, because he's extremely spoiled. I mean, he's basically lain in bed making himself sick his entire life because of believing things that weren't really true. And, he's had everything he's ever demanded handed to him on a silver platter by servants. So he's extremely spoiled and extremely like not socialized and stuff like that. So she's trying to figure out if she can trust him. She finally decides, okay, I'm going to trust him with this. And she tells him about the secret garden. And when she tells him about it, it's like something in him changes. Like the thought of opening the window and getting fresh air that people had told him to do for years and years was like disgusting. Like he hated it. But now with this possibility of like a secret garden that they could work on and be in together and like hope for something, like plan for something and hope for something and work for something, like something to hold on to, something tangible in life, and not just a picture in one of his storybooks, like something real. So a real possibility at a life, and it like sparks this hope in him. And all of a sudden, the air from the moors doesn't seem so bad anymore. Like maybe he could learn to draw some strength into his breath and some resolve to go out and actually do something with his life instead of wasting away to nothing. And so he starts to get really excited about it. So Mary goes down and she tells Dickon that she has discovered Colin and that he wants to come into the garden. So they devise a plan to bring him out into the garden, and from there, all kinds of other stuff ensues. I won't go through the entire story, so that way, if you want to read it, it will still have some surprises in it for you in store, but it was really incredible. It was a beautiful story. I love it so much. This is my number one favorite book of all time, my entire life, and I highly recommend this. So as for what I'm reading right now, I am reading Stephen King's Dr. Sleep. And this is a sequel to The Shining. I have never read The Shining before, but I was like, whatever. Like I said, I have stacks and stacks and stacks of years of book collecting that I haven't been reading, that I'm trying to catch up on and get current on. So I'm not going to go out and buy The Shining. I've seen the movie. That's close enough. And, like if you're reading something that's out of order, I typically find that they reference what happened before enough to where, you're not going to be totally in the dark. This does have Danny Torrance in it. It has Wendy. It has Dick Halloran in it in the beginning of the book. Then, because Danny, he's still very young when this book begins. And basically something has followed him from out of the Overlook Hotel and is still terrorizing him, even though they've moved to Florida. So they live in a different city than Dick, but Dick lives in Florida too. So he drives up to visit Wendy and Dan. And he teaches Danny how to take these, evil creatures that are shining at him, and basically create a strong box in his mind and lock them in that box in his mind so that way they can't come back anymore. So basically he does that. And then, you know, years pass and he's no longer like a 10-year-old kid anymore. Now he's like 30. And Dick Halloran's passed away. I think he just died from like old age or something. And Wendy has also passed away from lung cancer because she smoked like a chimney. And Dan has become what he vowed not to become, which was, you know, his father was like a bad drunk and everything like that. And Danny was like, I'm never going to drink alcohol. Dick Halloran told him never start drinking. And he's like a total alcoholic. And The Shining has plagued him his whole life to where, you know, he sees things he doesn't want to see. He hears things he doesn't want to hear. And the alcohol like kind of numbs it and blocks it out. So that helped him basically get addicted to the alcohol really bad. And we see him on basically the worst moment of his life, like him hitting bottom, which is where he wakes up. He wakes up one morning next to this girl from a bar, and she lives in this like really derelict shithole. And they were like doing coke the night before together. His memory is like fuzzy and coming back to him, and there's all this coke on the table. And then this little boy, this little toddler comes out of the room saying, "Mama!" And he's like, "Candy." And he's like walking towards the Coke on the table to go like eat it, thinking it's candy. And his diaper is like completely full because he's been neglected all night. So Dan like takes the Coke and puts it up on the kitchen counter and wipes down the coffee table and everything so the baby can't get to it. And he goes and puts the baby in the mother's arms, and she's still like half asleep and everything. So she didn't even get up or anything. And he goes into her wallet because he realizes he blew his entire week's pay, like $500, on the Coke last night because he was drunk as shit out of his mind and didn't know what he was doing. And so now he's like, shit, what am I gonna do? Like, how am I gonna get through the next week? So he goes into her purse, into her wallet, and finds like a bunch of food stamps and $70, and he takes her $70 and leaves. And then that like haunts him every single day for years and years and years. And he keeps drinking, and basically he works as an orderly in like hospice places and like nursing homes and stuff like that, but he can't seem to quit drinking. So he'll stay, you know, manageable for a short period of time, and then he'll go off on a bender and, you know, not show up to work for a day or something, and then he'll get shit canned. And he keeps hopping from town to town to town, getting job after job after job, keeping it for what time he can until he gets shit canned. And until he finally comes to this one small little town where some really good people give him a chance and really give him a leg up, and he actually like starts attending AA and stuff like that. But then there's this whole other story about this baby that gets born that has all of these crazy powers that she like predicted 9/11 and stuff like that. And so they're kind of like living these parallel lives that are going to intertwine at some point. And then in addition to that, there is this group of people called the True, that they're kind of like, you know, gypsy traveler type people. They ride around in caravans, but they like find people that have special powers because those people have like a special like life essence, and they basically murder the people until that essence comes up out of their faces, and they breathe it in and like consume it, and that's how they have like immortal bodies that makes them like immortal and like refreshes them and stuff like that. And so they travel around looking for people they can murder and eat up that essence. And yeah, now I'm almost halfway through the book. It's getting really, really good, and I like it a lot. I would definitely recommend this. It's pretty awesome. So that's where I'm at with that so far. And then 2 books that I haven't started reading yet, but these are going to be my next ones on my to read list after I finish this. I'm not sure which one I'm going to do first, but I'm going to read Stephen King's short story book, Just After Sunset. Says stories. Let's see how many stories does it say. There's Willa, the gingerbread girl, Harvey's dream, rest stop, stationary bike, the things they left behind, graduation afternoon, in the cat from hell, the New York Times at special bargain rates, mute, Iena, a very tight place, and sunset notes. So that's 14 short stories. I think I actually read this book like maybe a dozen years ago or something, and I think my aunt might have bought me the same book twice. But I haven't read this in so long. Since I got it again, I'm just going to read it again because it'll still be really good. I don't really remember anything about it, but I'm sure once I start reading it, some things will start to come back, you know? So we'll see what happens with that. And then I have Grady Hendrix, My Best Friend's Exorcism. And this looks pretty fun. This book packs all the magic of a summer horror flick. High school sophomores Abby and Gretchen have been best friends since 4th grade, but after an evening of skinny dipping goes disastrously wrong, Gretchen begins to act different. She's moody, she's irritable, and bizarre incidents keep happening whenever she's nearby. Abby's investigation leads her to some startling discoveries. And by the time their story reaches its terrifying conclusion, the fate of Abby and Gretchen will be determined by a single question. Is their friendship powerful enough to beat the devil? Like an unholy hybrid of Beaches and The Exorcist, My Best Friend's Exorcism blends teenage angst, adolescent drama, unspeakable horrors, and a mix of 80s pop songs into a pulse-pounding supernatural thriller. Doesn't that sound great? So those are my 2 next reads. So if you want to join me in reading those, and then we can talk about them on the next, book review video. So that is pretty much everything I have to say. I know this was a long one, but let me know if you've read any of these or if you have any similar thoughts on any of these books. And if you'd like to stay tuned, I also have a blind date with a book mystery box to open, and I'll be posting that soon. Thank you. Bye.